picture this. You're standing in the middle of this just massive crowd.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. The lights are pulsing in these blinding rhythmic flashes, and the music is just getting faster and faster and faster.
Building up that anxiety.
Exactly. And then suddenly the bass completely vanishes. You're just left with the snare drum that's rolling so rapidly, it literally sounds like a mosquito buzzing right by your ear.
It's a very specific frequency, yeah.
It is, and the tension is almost suffocating. You, and I mean tens of thousands of other people around you, are holding your breath. You're entirely suspended in time, just waiting for the inevitable explosion.
The drop.
The drop. This is the EDM drop. It is this massive cultural phenomenon, an incredibly visceral physical sensation, and, something we all intuitively understand the second we hear it.
Yeah, it's a remarkably powerful shared experience. And that moment of absolute suspension is entirely by design. It's a very calculated manipulation of your senses.
It really is. But what if I told you that an entire global dance music revolution looked at that exact engineered moment of climax and basically said, no thanks, we don't need it?
Which is such a radical departure from the norm.
So radical. Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is going to completely dismantle what you think you know about how dance music works. We're diving into this fascinating column from Monumental Movement Records from August 2026 about the structural DNA of a genre that literally took over the globe by just throwing out the established rulebook of tension and release.
It's a great piece.
It really is. I am so incredibly excited to share this mind-bending structural analysis with you today because honestly, once you understand the architecture of this music, it fundamentally changes how you hear everything else.
And rightfully so. We are not just discussing a trendy musical genre today. We are really doing a deep dive into the psychology of how our bodies interpret time, space, and energy through sound.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally about how different cultures engineer human movement.
Yeah.
And, how we physically process rhythm.
Engineered human movement. I love that phrasing.
Yeah.
Because, before we can understand why this new sound doesn't need a drop, we really have to put on our lab coats and forensically examine what an EDM drop actually is.
Right. We have to establish the baseline.
Exactly. We need to dissect why this specific musical structure has absolutely dominated electronic music for, the better part of the last 2 decades.
Easily 2 decades, yeah.
The blueprint for a typical EDM track is practically a mathematical formula at this point. Once you see the architecture, you just can't unsee it. You have the intro, the build-up, the drop, the core groove, a breakdown, a second build-up, second drop, and finally the outro.
It is a rigid formula, absolutely, but a highly, highly effective one. And it's backed by extensive acoustic psychology.
How so?
Well, if we look at academic analyses of electronic dance music, particularly the mechanics of that build-up phase you mentioned, we see very specific, almost surgical techniques that producers use to manufacture physical tension.
Like what kind of techniques?
So people often think a build-up is just the music getting louder.
Right, just turning the volume dial up?
Exactly. But in reality, it's frequently the exact opposite. It involves the deliberate, sudden reduction of musical notes. Most crucially, it involves the absolute removal of low frequencies.
Wow.
Yeah, they strip away the kick drum and the bass line entirely.
Which feels so counterintuitive for dance music. You're taking away the literal foundation of the track. What is the actual physical effect of pulling that bass out from under the listener?
To put it in biological terms, low frequencies, so the bass and the kick drum, those are the elements of music that resonate most deeply with the human body.
Right, you feel them.
Exactly. You don't just hear them in your ears, you feel them in your chest cavity, even in your skeletal structure. So when a producer suddenly removes those frequencies, your body experiences a very real sensory deprivation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you are suddenly completely ungrounded. And into that void, the producer introduces rising synth lines, which are often called risers.
Oh, I know those. The ones that sound like a siren going up.
Precisely. These are sounds that slowly sweep up the frequency spectrum, moving from the mid-range all the way up into this piercing, high-pitched treble.
And then, of course, there are those rapid snare rolls I mentioned in the intro.
Oh, yeah. The snare rolls are key.
The ones that start at a normal pace and then mathematically double and quadruple and octuple in speed.
Yes. That subdivision of time is crucial. By doubling the speed of the snare drum repeatedly, the producer is basically tricking your brain into feeling a sense of uncontrollable acceleration.
Even though the tempo is the exact same.
Exactly. The actual tempo of the song hasn't changed by a single beat per minute, but you feel like you're speeding up.
It's just so visceral. When I was thinking about the psychology of the drop, it hit me that the drop itself, that moment when the crowd just goes absolutely feral, isn't actually powerful just because it's loud.
No, not at all.
Like, if you were sitting in your car and just pressed play on a song and it immediately started at that maximum volume and intensity, it wouldn't have the same impact.
Right, it would just be noise.
Exactly. Its power is entirely dependent on what was stolen from you right before it happened. It's this exercise in extreme contrast. You feel the bass so intensely during the drop because you were literally starved of it for 30 seconds.
Precisely. The music is actively manipulating your neurological expectations. The silence or the thinness of that high-pitched sound during the buildup is actively communicating to your brain like, wait for it, something massive is coming.
Yeah.
The anticipation is doing the heavy lifting here because your brain releases dopamine, not just when you get the reward, but in the anticipation of the reward.
It makes me think of an intensely engineered roller coaster.
That's a great analogy.
If you think about it, the buildup in an EDM track is exactly like that agonizingly slow mechanical click, click as the coaster gets pulled up the steepest part of the track. You're looking around, you're getting higher, your stomach is in knots, and it's creating a very real, measurable physical anxiety.
Absolutely.
And then the drop is the sheer vertical plunge. But the wild thing is, in EDM, that waiting, that clicking up the hill, the anxiety, it is literally part of the musical product you are paying for.
What's fascinating here is how we can categorize this type of movement. We can think of it as vertical energy.
Vertical energy, okay.
Yeah, as your roller coaster analogy perfectly highlights, the energy in EDM goes straight up to a defined singular peak and then it crashes downward. It's music that is fundamentally designed to reach a destination. Philosophically speaking, it is teleological.
Teleological, meaning what exactly in this context?
Meaning that the entire structure exists purely for the sake of its endpoint.
Ah, yeah.
Every single element, from the intro to the hi-hats to the snare roll to the riser, it all exists purely to serve that one moment of arrival. The journey itself is entirely secondary to the destination.
It all points to the fireworks factory.
Exactly.
And, if we look at the cultural psychology behind that, it makes perfect sense why this dominated the West for so long.
How so?
Well, we live in a highly goal-oriented capitalist culture. We are completely obsessed with the climax, the massive payoff, the ultimate destination. The EDM drop is basically the musical equivalent of hustle culture. You grind through the anxiety of the buildup just so you can get the massive payout at the end.
That's a very astute cultural observation. It really reflects a society that values explosive events over continuous states of being.
But if EDM is this musical roller coaster designed to push you relentlessly toward a singular, explosive destination, what happens if the music just wants you to stay exactly where you are and explore the room you're already in?
That is the core question.
Right, and that question leads us directly into the heart of the South African phenomenon known as Amapiano.
Indeed it does. And to understand Amapiano, we really have to establish its geographical and temporal roots.
Set the scene for us.
We are talking about the early 2010s. Specifically in the townships of the Gauteng region in South Africa. So the sprawling urban areas around Johannesburg and Pretoria. By around 2012, we start seeing the very early experimental formations of this sound.
And the name itself gives away one of its key ingredients, right?
Yeah.
Amapiano is derived from the Zulu word for the pianos.
Yes.
Which refers to these incredibly lush, complex, jazzy keyboard melodies that just sort of sit on top of the tracks. We're talking about pioneers and foundational architects like MFR Souls, Jazzy Disciples, Kabza De Small, and DJ Stokey. These are the producers who started building a completely different kind of sonic architecture.
They really did. And the core thesis of this new architecture is a radical shift away from the vertical energy we just discussed in EDM toward what we can call horizontal energy.
Horizontal energy.
Yes. Instead of moving constantly up and down toward a massive climax, the energy in Amapiano flows sideways. It is a continuous rolling plateau of sound.
Okay, I'm going to push back on this a little bit on behalf of anyone listening who just really loves a good festival anthem.
Fair enough.
I get the idea of horizontal energy, but practically speaking, if there's no massive peak, if there's no fireworks display at the end of the buildup, doesn't the listener just get bored?
It's a common concern, yeah.
Like if you completely remove the tension and release, what stops an 8-minute track from just fading into the background and becoming elevator music? How do you keep a crowd engaged if you never give them the payoff?
It's a very natural skepticism, especially if your musical diet has been primarily Western pop or European electronic music.
Right.
The answer lies in how Amapiano redefines engagement. It basically replaces the event of a drop with a continuous process.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, in EDM, you are waiting for permission to let go. You are essentially waiting to dance at maximum capacity. But Amapiano, you don't have to wait to dance. You start dancing for the very first second the track plays.
But without the tension, where's the energy coming from?
The energy isn't lacking, it's simply distributed differently. Amapiano doesn't lack strength. Its strength is just evenly spread across the entire 7 or 8 minutes of the track, rather than being hoarded and released in a single 10-second window.
Oh, I see.
Think about architecture. EDM is like a massive, towering skyscraper, right? It draws your eye straight up to a single point in the sky. Amapiano is more like a sprawling, intricately designed botanical garden.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
The goal isn't to look at the highest point. The goal is to walk through it, to reside in the space, and to notice the complex details around you.
So instead of a roller coaster, it's more like getting caught in a really strong, warm ocean current.
Exactly.
You're constantly moving, you're constantly being carried by this immense power, but there's no sudden vertical drop-off. You're just entirely enveloped in it.
Exactly. You are residing inside the groove rather than perpetually waiting for the groove to arrive.
But logically, to distribute this energy so perfectly that people actually keep dancing for hours without needing that massive adrenaline spike, the music has to rely on something else to do the heavy lifting, right? It can't just be smooth jazz chords.
You're absolutely right. And this brings us to the most defining structural element of the entire genre, the element that makes Amapiano instantly recognizable anywhere in the world.
The log drum.
The log drum. It is the unmistakable heartbeat and the architectural spine of Amapiano.
Okay, let's really break down what this sounds like, because it is so unique. It's this incredibly deep, chest-rattling bass. But unlike a smooth, continuous synthesizer bass line, it has a very rounded, percussive attack.
Very punchy.
Yes, the notes are short, they have this rolling nature, and there is a heavy, heavy swing to the rhythm. The first time you hear it, it literally rattles your ribs, but it's also remarkably melodic. It doesn't just rumble, it sings. Now, considering it's called a log drum, you would immediately assume this is an acoustic instrument, right? Like someone literally hollowing out a piece of wood and striking it with a mallet.
That would be the logical assumption, given its organic woody timbre. But the reality of its origin is quite surprising, and honestly, it speaks volumes about modern musical innovation.
Yeah.
The log drum in Amapiano does not come from a physical instrument. It is 100% digital.
Which is still so crazy to me.
It actually stems from a software preset, specifically a stock preset called Fruity DX10, inside a music production software program called FL Studio.
This blew my mind when I read it, a stock plugin. For those who might not know, FL Studio, which used to be known as Fruity Loops, is a digital audio workstation. And the fact that this genre-defining sound came from FL Studio is not a coincidence, right? There's a whole socioeconomic layer to why this software was so prevalent in South African townships.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really a story of democratization. Hardware synthesizers, the physical keyboards made by Moog or Roland that defined European techno and house music, they were prohibitively expensive and difficult to acquire in these specific communities.
Yeah, you couldn't just go buy a Moog.
Exactly. But the laptop revolution changed everything. FL Studio was accessible. It could run on a basic, inexpensive laptop. It was easily shared via USB drives. It basically turned a teenager's bedroom into a world-class production studio.
And this Fruity DX10 preset, what exactly is it mathematically? Because it doesn't sound like a normal synthesizer to me.
The DX10 is an FM synthesizer. And FM stands for frequency modulation.
Okay.
Without getting overly bogged down in the physics of it, most basic synthesizers use subtractive synthesis, where you start with a big buzzy sound and just filter things out.
You're carving away the sound.
Right. But FM synthesis is different. It uses one waveform to modulate the frequency of another waveform. Yeah. The resulting mathematics create these highly complex, metallic, bell-like, or in this case, woody, acoustic-sounding tones.
So a producer like MDU, aka TRP, who is widely credited with pioneering this specific sound, he didn't just press a button, right? How did he manipulate this digital bell sound to make it the driving force of a dance floor?
It requires some really ingenious sound design. Producers took this out-of-the-box digital preset and completely manipulated its parameters. First, they pitched it down drastically.
Okay, to make it lower.
Exactly. Forcing those complex, woody frequencies down into the sub-bass register so it hits your chest instead of your ears.
Got it.
Then they manipulated what we call the envelope, specifically the decay. They made the sound short and punchy, so instead of a long, sustained hum, it hits with the sudden thwack of a physical drum.
Right, like a strike.
And finally, they applied extreme syncopation and swing to the rhythm.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, because as I was trying to visualize how the log drum functions in an Amapiano track, I had this realization.
What's that?
Well, in Western EDM or even rock music, the bass is basically like the concrete foundation of a house. It's incredibly heavy, it sits at the very bottom, it supports the entire structure of the song, but it doesn't really move. It just sits there, holding everything up on the main beats.
Right, it's an anchor.
Yes. But in Amapiano, the log drum is the bass, but it behaves like a lead melody. It plays these intricate, syncopated, wandering riffs. It's like the heavy concrete foundation of the house suddenly ripped itself out of the ground and just started doing backflips in the living room.
That is a brilliant architectural analogy.
Thank you.
And it perfectly explains the biomechanical reaction we have to the genre. Because the log drum contains both the low-end weight, the bass frequencies that you feel physically, and the intricate rhythmic phrasing of a lead percussion instrument, it fundamentally rewires how the listener's body reacts to the music.
I want to dig into that. How does it rewire our physical reaction?
Well, think about the EDM drop again. Your body absorbs a massive monolithic wall of sound all at once. It's a singular physical impact, like being hit by a wave.
Yeah, you just brace for it.
Exactly. But with the log drum, your body is reacting to micro changes in the pattern continuously. The bass literally becomes the rhythm. You are physically responding to the roll, the swing, the slight intentional delay of a note over and over again.
It's constant communication.
It is. Your body is engaged in a continuous physical dialogue with the low-end frequencies, rather than just bracing for a single impact.
And because the log drum is doing so much heavy lifting, because it's carrying the melody, the bass, and the rhythm all at the exact same time, Amapiano producers realized they had the freedom to start stripping away other elements.
They did.
Elements that Western dance music considered absolutely, unequivocally non-negotiable.
This is where the structural divergence becomes truly radical, and it often deeply confuses listeners who are only accustomed to Western club music.
Oh, I bet.
Let's look at the tempo first. Amapiano hovers around a relatively relaxed 115 beats per minute, or BPM.
Which is objectively slow for modern club music. I mean, most standard house and techno are usually pushing anywhere from 120 up to 135 BPM. 115 is practically a strut.
It is a strut. But the tempo isn't even the most shocking structural choice. It's what Amapiano often leaves out entirely. The most fascinating revelation is that Amapiano tracks often completely omit or heavily bury the kick drum.
Okay, stop right there. I have to call a timeout.
I know, it sounds impossible.
Because if you know anything about electronic music, the kick drum is the holy grail. The 4-on-the-floor beat, that relentless, booming thump, 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 thump on every single quarter note is the law.
It is.
It is the engine of the song. It tells the crowd exactly when to step. So I am genuinely struggling with this. How on earth do you keep a packed dance floor moving if you take away the kick drum?
It's a great question.
If the BPM is a slow 115 and there's no pounding kick drum to drive it forward, why doesn't an Amapiano track just feel like a slow, meandering R&B ballad? I just don't buy that people will naturally dance to avoid.
It's a brilliant question, and honestly, it gets to the very core of how we perceive rhythm. To understand how they achieve this forward momentum without a kick drum, we need to explore a concept known as rhythm stratification.
Okay, treat me like a total beginner. Break down rhythm stratification.
In a typical European house or techno track, the kick drum operates like a dictator. It loudly and aggressively dictates the time for everyone in the room.
It's very demanding.
Exactly. It hits on the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4. It leaves no room for interpretation. But in Amapiano, the timekeeping role is entirely redistributed into a democracy.
A democracy of time.
Yes, you have two distinct layers of time operating simultaneously. You have macro time and micro time.
I'm trying to visualize this. Give me a physical example.
Okay, imagine you are driving in your car, listening to the radio, and you are tapping your foot on the floorboard.
Okay.
You tap your foot slowly, at a steady, relaxed pace. That foot tap is the macro time. It is the overarching 115 BPM pulse. It is the broad canopy of the song.
Okay, I'm tapping my foot. That's the macro time. What's the micro time?
Now imagine your hands on the steering wheel. While your foot is tapping a slow, steady beat, your fingers are furiously drumming out rapid, complex, offbeat patterns between those foot taps.
Oh, I see.
That is the micro time. In Amapiano, underneath that slow macro canopy, You have highly syncopated percussion filling all the empty microscopic
The
space.
syncopation, right?
And syncopation, in simple terms, is when you emphasize the spaces between the beats, rather than the beats themselves.
So the kick drum isn't exactly missing. Its dictatorial function has just been delegated to a massive committee.
Precisely. The responsibility of keeping time is shared across a mosaic of instruments. You might have a shaker playing a rapid 16th note pattern, a vocal chop that hits on an offbeat, a jazz piano chord that slides in slightly late, and crucially, the rolling, unpredictable swing of the log drum.
Wow.
The timekeeping is mathematically much softer and far less aggressive, but infinitely more complex.
So instead of one massive pounding drum hitting you over the head every single second, telling your brain exactly when your foot should hit the floor, you have 50 tiny rhythmic elements constantly weaving around each other, merely suggesting how you might want to move your shoulders or your hips or your neck.
Exactly. And this is why it doesn't feel like a slow ballad, despite the 115 BPM. The brain stays incredibly engaged because the rhythm is a continuous puzzle it gets to playfully solve, rather than a military command it has to blindly follow.
That is so cool.
It is. The sheer density of the microtime creates an illusion of intense speed and momentum within a deceptively slow framework.
It's so sophisticated. It treats the listener like an active participant rather than just a target for sound waves. But, this highly decentralized democratic approach to rhythm didn't just fall out of the sky one day in 2012.
No, absolutely not.
This is the result of decades of hyper-localized musical evolution that happened completely independently of the massive European and American EDM festival circuits.
Yes, tracing the historical lineage is vital here. We cannot view Amapiano in a vacuum as some sudden spontaneous invention. It is deeply, deeply rooted in South African history.
Right, take us back.
The timeline properly begins in the 1990s, during a critical period of national transition. As South Africa was transitioning out of apartheid, international borders opened, and there was an influx of international house music, specifically Chicago house.
Okay, the classic four-on-the-floor sound.
Exactly. Local producers integrated this with local styles, which led to the birth of a genre called Kwaito.
Let's define Kwaito for the listener, because it's really the grandfather of this whole sound. What made Kwaito unique?
Kwaito was the defining urban youth culture sound of the 90s in South Africa. Structurally, it took house music and drastically slowed it down. It featured deep rolling bass lines, and instead of the soaring diva vocals of American house, it featured rhythmic, chanted, often spoken word vocals rooted in local dialects and township slang.
So we have Kwaito as the foundation. Where does the evolution go from there?
As we move into the 2000s, the evolution branches geographically. In Pretoria, you see the localized development of something called Bacardi House, pioneered by figures like DJ Skoko.
Bacardi House, okay.
Bacardi House took Kwaito, sped it up slightly, and introduced a much sharper, more electronic, almost military snare drum pulse.
Interesting.
Then, in the late 2000s and into the 2010s, you have the explosion of Greekom in Durban.
I definitely want to pause on Greekom for a second because the sonic signature of that genre is wildly different from everything else. It's often described as a darker sound with a broken beat. What does a broken beat actually mean mathematically, and why does it sound dark?
And it's a great question. If standard house music is a perfectly symmetrical circle, hitting predictably on the 1, 2, 3, and 4, a broken beat is like a jagged asymmetrical polygon.
Oh, that's a great visual.
In Greekom, the kick drum might hit on the 1, completely skip the 2, hit a fraction of a second before the 3, and then hit on the 4. It lurches, it staggers.
Unpredictable.
Highly unpredictable. And that mathematical asymmetry creates a psychological sense of unease or tension, which is why we perceive it as dark. It doesn't hold your hand. It features minimal instrumentation, heavy, ominous bass, and these jagged, syncopated drum patterns.
And so Amapiano comes along and basically serves as the ultimate sophisticated synthesis of all these incredibly rich traditions.
Exactly.
It takes the slow, relaxed tempo and the vocal stylings of 90s Kwaito. It borrows the sharp, electronic, percussive pulse of Bacardi House. It absorbs the deep, chest-rattling bass presence of Greekom. And then, completely uniquely, it layers on top of that the lush, melodic influences of jazz, lounge music, and even local South African church music.
It is a masterclass in musical cross-pollination.
I think detailing that lineage is so important because it's really tempting, especially for listeners, critics, or music journalists in Europe or North America, to view Amapiano strictly through a Western lens.
Yes, that happens constantly.
To view it as a response or a rebellion against EDM, like, oh, they got tired of big drops, so they intentionally made the opposite. But that's a completely Western-centric fallacy. It assumes Western music is the sun everything else revolves around.
Exactly, which it isn't.
Amapiano is actually a completely parallel evolutionary branch. Instead of thinking of music as one big tree, it's more like language. Amapiano didn't evolve from EDM to be better than EDM. They're completely separate language trees that develop in different environments. It's like how in nature, a shark and a dolphin look similar but evolved from completely different ancestors.
That is a superb analogy. They share the common trait of being electronic music made for dancing, but their foundational grammar is entirely different.
The grammar, right.
And understanding that different grammar helps us understand perhaps the most misunderstood element of Amapiano to an outsider, which is the role of repetition.
Right. Let's address this, because to a listener raised on EDM, where every 16 bars there is a new synth, a new riser, a new drop, a constant barrage of new information, an Amapiano track might initially sound like it's just lazily looping the exact same 7-second groove for 8 straight minutes.
To the untrained ear, yes, it can sound repetitive. But in this specific South African musical lineage, looping a pattern isn't lazy production. It is a highly intentional psychological tool. It operates as a memory device for the human body.
A memory device. How does that work in practice?
Well, think about when you walk into a new room. At first, you are looking around, analyzing the dimensions, noting where the furniture is. You are actively processing the space.
Taking it all in, yeah.
But after a few minutes, you stop thinking about the walls. The room becomes a subconscious architecture. In Amapiano, the core rhythmic loop operates the exact same way.
Oh, wow.
Once your body memorizes that core groove, once you stop actively trying to decode the 115 BPM pulse and just internalize it, that loop becomes an invisible architecture. It becomes a safe, predictable room you were standing in.
Okay, I follow that. But if I'm just standing in a safe room for 8 minutes, don't I get bored?
You would if the room never changed. But this is where the genius of the microtime comes in.
Right.
Once your brain feels completely secure in the foundation of the loop, it is freed up to notice tiny, exquisite variations. Because you aren't waiting for a massive drop to rearrange the whole room, you suddenly notice when the producer drops a hi-hat out for exactly half a bar.
Or a vocal chop.
Exactly. You notice when a new, breathy vocal slice echoes faintly in the background. You notice when the log drum adds just one extra, slightly delayed, syncopated hit. Because the foundation is so stable and repetitive, your brain can appreciate microscopic changes without ever losing the groove.
It's rewarding active listening. Instead of the DJ pressing a giant red button that says JUMP and no W, the producer's inviting you to lean in and pay attention to the details.
It's an invitation, yes.
And because this structure is built on this continuous shared bodily memory rather than a single explosive audio event, it turned out to be the absolute perfect music for the era we live in now, this highly connected, hyper-visual, social media-driven world.
And this brings us to the global explosion of the genre in the 2020s. Amapiano didn't just stay a local phenomenon in Gauteng. It breached the walls and became a worldwide cultural force.
It's everywhere now.
It is. And the catalyst for this global expansion wasn't massive marketing budgets from record labels. It was viral, decentralized dance challenges.
Right. We're talking about absolute global behemoths like the track Jerusalema or more recently Shwala Bam. These weren't just songs that people passively added to a Spotify playlist to listen to at the gym. They were full-blown, interactive cultural movements.
It took over the internet.
And platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube were the literal vehicles for this spread. They allowed the specific, localized South African choreography to travel geographically right alongside the audio files.
The visual element cannot be overstated when analyzing Amapiano's success. With EDM, the visual culture is often centered on a single figure, a DJ standing behind a massive desk on a stadium stage, surrounded by million-dollar laser shows and pyrotechnics.
The God complex, basically.
Basically, yes. The crowd is looking at the DJ. But with Amapiano, the visual culture is the community itself. It's a circle of people dancing.
I have a question about that cross-cultural translation, actually. Why does this specific genre translate so easily across borders? I mean, you have teenagers in Tokyo or London or Brazil doing the exact same Amapiano footwork as kids in Pretoria.
It's incredible to watch.
They might have absolutely no idea what the Zulu lyrics mean. They might not know where Gauteng even is on a map. Why does this complex, syncopated music bridge that immense cultural gap so effortlessly?
It's because Amapiano bypasses the intellectual language centers of the brain and speaks directly to the motor cortex. It speaks to the body.
Okay, that makes sense.
You don't have to intellectually understand the cultural context of a snare roll to know you're supposed to jump when the bass hits an EDM.
Yeah.
But with Amapiano, the dance itself actually teaches you how to hear the music.
Wait, the dance teaches you the music?
Exactly. When you watch a video of someone doing an Amapiano dance challenge on TikTok, you are visually seeing the microrhythms we talked about earlier. You see a dancer's shoulder twitch precisely on a syncopated log drum hit.
Oh,
You see a foot slide perfectly in time with a specific buried shaker pattern. The choreography makes the invisible, complex rhythm visible.
that's fascinating.
By mimicking the dance, your body learns how to interpret the syncopation before your brain even understands what's happening mathematically.
Wow. The choreography makes the invisible rhythm visible. That is profound. It means the genre isn't just a static audio file you consume, it's an entire participatory ecosystem.
Very much so.
It encompasses the fashion, the local slang, the specific biomechanics of how you move your body, and the community. In an EDM festival, the DJ is acting like an orchestral conductor, commanding a massive, passive crowd to react on cue. But in Amapiano, whether you're in a local tavern in South Africa or watching a TikTok in your bedroom in London, the community is actively building the groove together.
It is a shared horizontal spatial experience rather than a top-down directed chronological event. And this ecosystem has become so robust that Amapiano has firmly established itself on the global stage.
Definitely not a niche genre anymore.
Not at all. Which means it is now entering a fascinating new phase, the crossover era. It is inevitably rubbing shoulders and fusing with the very genres it contrasts with so sharply.
Right, the fusion phase. We're seeing Amapiano being blended with Afrobeats from West Africa, with American hip-hop, R&B, and standard Western house music. Major global pop artists are jumping on Amapiano beats to stay relevant. But there is one specific, highly experimental subgenre that really caught my eye, which is called techno Amapiano.
Yes, techno Amapiano is a brilliant case study in musical engineering because it actually attempts to reintroduce the hard-driving kick drum back into the Amapiano groove.
Oh boy.
It takes that relentless, rigid 135 BPM, four-on-the-floor European techno pulse and actively tries to marry it with the slow 115 BPM syncopated swing of the log drum.
Mathematically, how on earth does that work? How do you marry a rigid grid with something that deliberately swings off the grid?
It requires an incredible understanding of polyrhythms. Producers have to stretch the grid. They might use a halftime feel, where the techno kick drives the macro time aggressively, but the log drum still operates in the syncopated micro time, sliding around the kick rather than locking onto it.
It must create so much tension.
It creates a fascinating friction. It's a hybrid that appeals to the European desire for relentless momentum while maintaining the African sensibility of complex swing.
Which kind of brings us perfectly full circle and clarifies the actual central thesis of this entire deep dive, why Amapiano doesn't need a drop. The crucial point here is that doesn't need a drop does not mean Amapiano is formless.
No, absolutely not.
It doesn't mean drops are somehow illegal, or that if a producer decides to put a riser and a build-up in an Amapiano track, they get kicked out of the club.
Correct. It simply means that the genre's structural integrity does not depend on a drop to function as elite, effective dance music.
Right.
The horizontal groove is strong enough to stand entirely on its own. If a producer chooses to add a drop or a techno kick drum, it is a stylistic choice, an ornament. It is not a structural load-bearing requirement.
That's like learning you don't need massive CGI explosions at the end of every single movie to make it a summer blockbuster, as long as the dialogue and the psychological tension keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time.
Exactly.
The question isn't, why didn't you use fireworks? But rather, why did we ever assume fireworks were mandatory in the first place?
This raises an important question regarding the entire future trajectory of electronic music. For decades, the trajectory of dance music has been a relentless pursuit of more.
More everything.
Producers wanted louder bass, faster BPMs, bigger festival stages, more lasers, and more explosive drops. It was a sonic arms race of pure intensity.
And it still kind of is in some circles.
True. But Amapiano proves that the future of dance music might actually lie in a completely different direction. The frontier might not be louder or faster. The frontier might be deeper, more detailed, and longer lasting. It suggests that complexity, swing, and subtlety can move a crowd of 50,000 people just as effectively as brute acoustic force.
So, what does this all mean? Let's recap the massive journey we've been on today. We started our deep dive strapped into the peak of an EDM roller coaster, analyzing the intense, anxiety-inducing climb of the buildup and the sheer vertical plummet into the drop.
A very bumpy ride.
For sure. We looked at how Western dance music engineered a teleological experience, a journey entirely focused on a massive, explosive destination, much like our goal-oriented culture.
And then we stepped off that roller coaster and walked into the endlessly rolling, horizontally flowing 115 BPM groove of a South African township.
So smooth.
We explored the digital origins of the log drum and how producers manipulated an FL Studio preset to replace the traditional static bass line, transforming a foundational element into a dancing, syncopated lead. We saw how the dictatorial timekeeping function of the kick drum was decentralized into a democracy, spread across a committee of shakers, vocals, and polyrhythms, creating complex microrhythms within a slow macro pulse.
We traced the parallel evolution of this sound, the separate language tree, from the slow vocal chants of Kwaito through the jagged, broken beats of Giham, proving that Amapiano is its own distinct biological branch of dance music.
A rich history.
Very much so. And finally, we saw how its participatory, community-driven nature, where the choreography actually teaches your brain how to interpret the syncopation, allowed it to bypass language barriers entirely and conquer the globe.
It is a remarkable testament to the power of musical innovation born not from expensive studios, but from community, accessibility, and shared physical experience.
It truly is. So, to you listening right now, I have a challenge for you.
Oh, a challenge.
Yep. The next time you put on a dance track, whether you're at a club, driving in your car, or running at the gym, I want you to pay close attention to your own body. Ask yourself, are you gritting your teeth, tensing your muscles, just grinding through the anxiety, waiting for the destination? Or are you actually enjoying the architectural space you're in? Are you residing in the groove?
It's a highly valuable exercise in mindfulness, applied directly to how we physically consume culture.
And it makes me think about something even bigger. We live in a society that honestly operates incredibly like an EDM track.
In what way?
Think about it. We are constantly hustling, grinding, building up immense tension in our careers, our relationships, our personal lives. We are desperately waiting for that one massive drop, the big promotion, the dream vacation, buying a house, the big life event, to finally give ourselves permission to feel joy.
That's a very real phenomenon.
It is. But if a genre like Amapiano can conquer the globe by proving that true, sustainable satisfaction lies in continuous, subtle, horizontal micro-movements rather than explosive, fleeting peaks, well, what would it look like to live your life a little less like EDM and a little more like Amapiano?